I'm Andrew. What
Oh,
was your name,
nice to
sorry?
meet you.
What was your name, sorry?
Sophia.
Sophia?
Yeah,
Sophia. I'm using Omegle to ask people kind of a deep question. So I got a deep question for you.
I'd love to hear it.
What do you reckon happens to us after we die?
I am an atheist, so I just believe nothing. It's
Alright.
over.
What convinces you that that's the way it works?
Scientifically, I don't see how heaven and hell would work. I
Right?
just see it as living cells. We're organisms. That's really it.
Definitely. So how do we know that if I put you on a set of scales or measure you with a tape measure or take your temperature with a thermometer, can I measure the existence or non-existence of a soul with those tools?
No, I don't think you can. No.
Right. But it's
What is
kind
a soul?
well
What
it's
is
kind
a
of
soul to you?
well basing on the generalities of all of the various major religions, they would talk about a part of us that is not material. Okay,
You
so that's
can't measure it. You can't see it.
right.
You
Well,
can't.
it's okay, exactly right. Which means that it's about as effective as me walking up to you with a stopwatch and saying, "I'm going to take your temperature." It's
Wouldn't
not the
work.
right tool for the job, right? And in fact, so if the only measure that we're willing to say is measurable by the scientific method,
hmm
I think you'd be right. We can't prove that a soul does or does not exist.
What would your answer be if I asked you the same question you asked me? What would you say?
Which one, the afterlife question or
The
the?
afterlife question.
I grew up as an atheist. I was an atheist until I was 20 years old. At 20 years old, I left atheism for agnosticism,
hmm
and then probably 7 months after that, somewhere in there, I became a Christian. I believe it is very reasonable to argue that there must be a God. I
Okay.
would also argue it's very reasonable to believe that a particular one out of all of the various religious books, obviously the Bible, is divine in its origin rather than just man-made, and therefore that is the only way we can know about things like a soul, heaven, hell, that sort of stuff.
What
Now,
converted you to Christianity? What changed?
uh, kind of somewhat of a long story. The short version is I ultimately left atheism in part because I found it to be a position that was intellectually indefensible. The
Okay.
only way you can be properly an atheist and say there is no such thing as God is to possess all knowledge. And you and I don't come close to possessing all knowledge. In fact, the moment we did possess all knowledge, we'd kind of be the definition of God. We'd be self-refuting.
I agree with that.
All right, so the best we can actually be is not so much atheistic, but agnostic in that direction, which is I don't know. It means I lack the evidence, or even I lack the desire to pursue the evidence and find an answer on these things. Whereas I would argue it's fairly easy to argue that there must be a creator. Did you grow up with a religious background, or?
Actually, no, my family was Catholic, but I was never raised Catholic.
All right. So,
I just grew up to form my own beliefs.
sure. We're always kind of shaped by the influences around us as well. But yeah, we sort of hit that point, I think, when we're very small children. We kind of just believe what our mum and dad tell us to believe. That's kind of the way it works. We hit
hmm
that window of the teenage years. We start reasoning through these things for ourselves. And a lot of people change their worldview in some way during that period of time. Um, what bothers me a little bit is sometimes I don't think when people change their worldview that I don't think their reasons are always all that intellectual. I
hmm
think oftentimes there's a bias that affects us, and I don't think most people even see the bias. And the bias is this: if there is a God, then I'm not in charge. I don't get to be the boss of me. And I think that bias alone will cause us to interpret evidence in a way that is not consistent.
You
Because
just made me like realize something I've never thought of before.
well, I've been
Sometimes,
studying this a long time now. I'm a lot older than I look. I'm one of the older people you'll meet here on Omegle. Um, I, in fact, think that the evidence In fact, I'm going to perform an experiment. I'm going to use you as my guinea pig. Here we go. Ready?
Got it.
This is an Android tablet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you two choices. Either option one, somebody designed my Android tablet and built it. Option two, nobody designed my Android tablet. It was an entirely random process, and the reason this exists is entirely accidental. The glass, the plastic, all that stuff just fell in that pattern, and it became an Android tablet. Which one are you going to go for?
Somebody built it?
Did you see them?
No, I did not.
Have you seen any records of the person that built my Android tablet?
I have not.
Then how do you know that person exists?
I'm not sure if they do.
Well, so you're saying that it's plausible this is an accident?
I don't know. I don't think so. Things just don't come together like that.
Right. So because what I mean, I kind of backed you into a logic corner.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if the only two choices we have, and they make sense, is this was uncaused, in other words, it was an accident, or it was caused, and a cause is always going to be an intelligent cause, especially when you look at this level of complexity, you immediately went towards that this is designed and caused by someone. And I think that's because this is a highly complex bit of tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's too many pieces in this, too many complexities, too many really specific tolerances and things about this to argue this was an accident. Now that doesn't mean there's not a mathematical probability that this was an accident. It's just a probability that is so far catastrophically bad that between the choice of horrendous probability it designed itself, it was an accident, or someone caused it, you immediately went for someone caused it.
Mm-hmm.
Second object in my experiment, my water bottle. Much simpler than the Android tablet.
Very.
Was it designed, or is this the result of a series of accidents?
You're confusing me now.
Well, it's not my goal to confuse, but my goal is to push people a little bit. I like pushing people. Now I'm going to guess you're going to say that this is designed, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to try and convince me that no one designed my water bottle. This is a complete accident.
Can't convince you that because I think it's designed.
Right. Again, this is nowhere near the complexity of the Android tablet, but it's got enough structure to look at it. You go, very clearly designed. Okay? Mm-hmm. There's a probability connected to this happening by accident. Again, it's very, 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 very low. And so faced with those two choices, we argue designed. Now's the sucker punch. Okay?
Yeah.
Cellular life. Is cellular life complex?
Very.
Yeah, even at the bacteria level, which are the simplest life forms on this planet, cellular life is massively complex. You have so many interrelated and interworking parts. You have the cell membrane, which is this membrane that has the ability to allow nutrients to pass through, okay, so that they can be processed into energy for the cell, and yet that the whole cell doesn't kind of spill out sideways. You've got the mechanisms inside that can transform those nutrients into energy to power the cell. You've got a whole little host of little micro machines that basically copy and replicate DNA and RNA so that you can create cell division. You've got mechanisms in there that repair the cell, and so on. There's heaps of these things. These are really complex structures. And if you look at them at the DNA level, you see a piece of code, essentially the blueprints that make up that cell. It's 30,000 amino acids strung end to end, like a really complex bit of computer code. Now we have the same choice. Was this caused or uncaused? Was this designed by someone, or was it just a complete accident, just happened to do this?
It's too advanced to be an accident. So I guess
I would argue exactly the same. Congratulations, you just made a case for the existence of some creator.
Wow.
There you go. Now, it doesn't tell you who the creator is.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't tell you if it's the god of a particular religion. Doesn't even tell you a lot about who this creator is. But when we look at cellular life and DNA and the complexity of life, we have an argument that there must have been a creator. Because there is a mathematical probability that that cell was an accident, that DNA was an accident. It's just so far off the charts, we don't have numbers that big in the entire universe.
There would be so many accidents that would have to lead up to us.
Well,
To have people.
I didn't even get as far as us. I only got as far as a bacteria.
Oh.
Okay, a bacteria, 30,000 amino acids, 30,000 base pairs in its genome. Do you know how big the human genome is, by any chance?
No clue.
3 billion base pairs.
Wow.
Right. I would argue you want evidence that there is a creator. Go look in a mirror. You will see a being whose systems are impeccably designed, massively complex, off the charts. I mean, your eye. What's better, your eye or the camera in the back of my tablet?
Our eyes.
Leaves it for dead. Your eye even leaves these really high-end DSLRs. Still a better lens, still a better system, more megapixels, right? What's more powerful, the chipset in my tablet or your brain?
My brain.
Oh yeah, easily.
Of course.
If we would never argue that this tablet was an accident, I don't think we can possibly argue that you and I are accidents either.
I agree.
There you go. There you go. We've done it. We've proved there must be a creator. Which means if officially, I'm going to guess that the label atheist probably isn't the right one for you anymore.
No.
Now agnostic is maybe a better label.
I agree with that.
All right. Let me have another go. Let's see if I can take you half a step further forward.
Got it.
Because since we're doing this, I'm going to suggest that when we can look at the created realm and know one or two things about this creator. Must be intelligent. Must be powerful. Must be creative. Must make decisions, had to decide to create. And arguably, if this creator created the universe that we exist in, must be non-material and existing outside of our physical universe in some sense. We hit a bit of a wall there. At that point, we can't know much more about who this creator is, unless this creator deliberately chooses to speak to humanity and say, this is who I am. The only way we know more at this point is by divine revelation. That is, God speaks. Now, do we have any books, for instance, in our entire human culture that claim to be divine revelation?
Isn't the Bible?
That would be one. There's a whole bunch of them, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
The Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormon, even the teachings of the Buddha at kind of a sort of a level. And there's a whole bunch more too, right? These all claim to be divine revelation. Now, you don't have to have studied these very much to answer the question, do these books all agree with each other?
Oh, they believe in a creator, all of them.
Right? And that's almost the limit of how much they agree.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They would all agree that we have a creator. They would all agree that we have a soul, that there's a part of us that is non-measurable. And they would all agree that that soul will be judged, and that based on that judgment there is an afterlife. And they would largely have a similar morality to them. Beyond that, they are also vastly, vastly, vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If they contradict each other, can they all be equally correct?
I don't think so, no.
Simple bit of logic. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
14.
14. Okay, if I said that you're 18, and then I brought someone else in and they said, no, she's definitely 16,
Mm-hmm.
Are we all correct?
No.
Right, if you're right, then we're wrong. If this other person's right, then we're both wrong. And if I'm right, then okay, it's called the law of non-contradiction, the basic law of logic. If all of these religions make entirely contradictory claims, they can't all be true. It doesn't mean any of them is true, but it means they can't all be true. So the question is, when we study these books, can we determine which one, if any of them, is actually divine revelation, or are they all a man-made book? You can only do that at some level by studying them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would we know if it's a divine book?
I'm not sure.
For me, as a former atheist who became an agnostic, there was one of those books consistently defied my scrutiny, and that was the Bible. The Bible, at a surface reading by someone who really doesn't know much about what they're reading, looks like it might have some contradictions in it, but those are usually pretty easily solved. It's shown to be a brilliant history book. It's archaeologically verifiable on so many points. Other ancient documents verify crucial details. We can even show that it's been really well preserved down to us and it hasn't been corrupted and changed all the way along, which just makes it a really well preserved history book and doesn't make it divine. But there is one other feature about the Bible that would suggest that it was divine. Prophecy fulfilled. Do you know the term prophecy?
I'm not sure what that means, though.
It's the idea that God speaks to a person and says, in the future, this is what's going to happen. Okay, the prophet's not dreaming this, he's hearing from God, and that's how he knows. How would we know if that person had truly heard from God?
I don't think we can.
Well, we can, if it comes true.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if God speaks to a prophet and says, this event will happen in this way, in this time, in this sort of situation, and then sometime later, at the time ordained, that's exactly what happens, and it's how it happens, we say, well, that prophet was hearing from God, because otherwise how could they have known that? The Bible is full of prophecies. Lots and lots and lots and lots of them. Yeah. There's a whole big chunk of them deal with what would happen with the nation of Israel prior to the time of Jesus. Talking about, the fact that the nation would be carried away into captivity because of their disobedience to God. And God even tells details like, this is the name of the Persian emperor who will come and set the Israelites free at the end of the 70-year captivity. The Persians weren't even a nation at that point, and that emperor certainly hadn't been born yet, let alone knowing his name. And yet it just waltzes through and fulfills those prophecies. But it gets even more pointed when it comes to prophecies about this person, Jesus. There are arguably over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament that talk about who Jesus would be and what he would do. And he just walks onto the scene and fulfills them all.
Wow.
Details like, he would be born in the town of Bethlehem. Now the town of Bethlehem, tiny little backwater place, not a high birth rate. So that limits the potential number of people that could fulfill that right off the start. The approximate year. So now we've got maybe down to a few dozen people in all of human history, limited just by those two prophecies. Jesus was betrayed, and he was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. That was prophesied. The Bible said what would happen with the silver after the betrayer decided he'd done the wrong thing. Talks about what would happen to Jesus' clothes when he was crucified. Talked about method of death by crucifixion 700 years before crucifixion, before the event happened, and hundreds of years before crucifixion had even been invented. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of prophecies, and Jesus just walks in and fulfills them all. Would that be an evidence that maybe we're looking at something more than a man-made book?
Yes, very much so.
40 different human authors used in writing the Bible. Now, if you and I get 40 different people and ask them to write a coherent story together, are they going to get a nice coherent story?
No, they won't.
They're going to be all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet the Bible, start to finish, has these consistent threads that run all the way through from the earliest chapters all the way to the end. Constant themes that run all the way through. Ideas that are these prophecies looking forward, consistently building and building and building and building to the time of Jesus. Threads and shadows that come. When you really read the whole Bible, start to finish, which does take a long time, you see these threads that run all the way through at a level that just, no way human beings orchestrated that. There is no way human beings would have come up with the stuff that is in there. To me, I found that utterly convincing, which is the reason I became a Christian and not a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Mormon or something else.
Makes sense.
All right.
OAC Ministries Queensland runs training in how you can share your faith. To learn more, check out the links below or email us at qld@oac.org.au. If this video helped you, please click that like button and please subscribe to this channel for more videos about sharing your faith.